Welcome back. You're still tuned in to News and Views on myself, Salailo Makwidiri, and we're going to be moving on to a very, very interesting story. This past Sunday, the streets of Soweto were filled with a powerful demonstration of faith and solidarity. Churches from across denominations united under the banner of the March for Palestine, and they were calling for justice, they were calling for peace and humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza. The march, which covered 3 kilometers from Grace Bible Church to Regina Mundi Catholic Church, comes at a very, very critical moment in the 2 years long crisis, genocide that's currently unfolding in Gaza, where more than 67,000 Palestinians have been killed and communities continue to face relentless attacks. Leading the charge were faith leaders, ordinary Christians who believe that the church has a moral duty to denounce oppression and stand against human rights violations. Something that we know is a norm. Even during the anti-apartheid struggle here in South Africa, churches were always a point of reference. You have Archbishop Desmond Tutu, who's one of the foremost anti-apartheid stalwarts, who was the man of the cloth. So I think it was only fitting to kind of drive that message even further. And joining us today to reflect on that historic march and the role of faith in advocacy is Msizi Khuhlane, one of the organizers of the SAC4P, South African Churches for Palestine March, and is joining us telephonically. Msizi, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Really appreciate you giving us your time this morning.
Good morning, sir. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having us.
No, the pleasure is all ours. I think let's jump right into it. Let's start with the march in itself. What motivated churches from so many different denominations to come together for Palestine this weekend? 2 years since this genocide, this siege on Gaza began.
Because over the last 2 years and throughout the genocide, the churches have made statements, nice statements and condemnations and all, but the church has never been on the streets to be seen, to demonstrate what it says. And we approached church leaders and we said it's about time. It's 2 years down the genocide and the churches have not been seen to demonstrate where they stand in this genocide. So we approached church leaders to say we need to get onto the street. And in fact, the choice of, as you just introduced it earlier, the choice of Regina Mundi was actually trying to resuscitate that culture. The church was in the forefront of the apartheid struggle, together with other liberation movements, and it's about time that the church also be in the forefront of condemning this genocide and starvation of the Palestinians. So we went into the streets because the church has not been seen on the streets since this 2-year genocide. And that's why we organized that much.
Some critics, Msizi, argue that religious groups should stay out of politics. How do you respond to that idea? The idea that being part of the discourse, like standing for Palestine, is inherently political versus being a moral and ethical stance because of how, let's say, polarizing some still feel the issue of Israel and Palestine is, although at this point, many know the truth.
Look, anyone who says church must stay out of politics probably has read their Bible with some money-colored glasses. When God says, whatever you do to the least of these, you do unto me, how is that not political? So if you kill 67,000 of the least of these ones, you are killing God 67,000 times. How does the church keep silent on that? How do people of faith keep silent on that? So it was for us not a tricky question at all. It's a matter of time. In fact, we felt it has been too late that the churches keep the street. It should have been on the streets in the first few weeks of the genocide. So for us, there was no distinction between us as Christians and the silence that the colors was deafening on the streets for us. There is no line between the 20,000 children killed and our faith. We needed to say, the church needed to say, God is weeping because God has been killed 20,000 times as many as the children have been killed. and buried under the rubble in Palestine. So that question for other people about the separation of faith and politics is a very privileged position for people to hold. People who are suffering under the bombs calling on God. Why would God not be involved?
Almost definitely. Msizi, there's often this misconception, especially here in South Africa, that this is a cause for the Muslim minority. The issue of Palestine, traditionally, we've seen our Muslim brothers and sisters being the ones that are in the forefront when it comes to advocating for the rights of people of Palestine, calling our government to act. But this time around, as the Christian community, you decided that you're going to break those blurred lines. How important is it to further drive that narrative that this is not a Muslim, Christian, Jew conversation, but it is one of human rights? It's one of I think seeing what's happening in another part of the world and knowing and understanding the history that our country has and saying, well, we can't sit idle, something needs to be done.
If Palestine was 90% Christians, I kid you not, Benjamin Netanyahu would be killing Christians. That the matter of faith in Palestine is incidental. This is colonialism. This is land theft. Whether the Palestinians were non-believers or Christians or Muslims, the colonial project was going to go on. So for us, it was never about Muslims, or in fact, it can't be. For us, it couldn't have been only about Muslims, because Jesus Christ is born in Palestine, for crying out loud. So how is it that the land in which Jesus Christ was born, and there are Christians in Palestine who have reached out to us. So for us, it was never about faith. It was about humanity that was suffering, humanity that was being starved, humanity that was bombed by bombs double the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombs. It was just simply a tragedy and a genocide. It didn't matter whether one of my friends from Palestine in South Africa is not even a believer. He's Palestinian. So it was for us a matter of humanity and a genocide that was taking place. And when God says, if you've touched the least of these ones, you are doing that to me. For us, it was automatic that we should respond. The church should respond, not because there are Christians in Palestine, but because there's a humanitarian crisis unfolding in Palestine.
Msizi, before I let you go, and I think this is a very, very important part, as a Christian myself, there's a certain connotation that biblical Israel holds to me. And sometimes I think that gets lost in translation, especially for many Christians who don't fully grasp the idea that the state of Israel, as we know it today, is very, very much not the Israel of the Bible. How much work still needs to be done from the churches, from an education and conscientizing point of view, to educate the people of South Africa, who are majority Christians, to make that distinction?
It's unsurmountable, actually. The biggest problem is that people think to tell Netanyahu what he's doing is evil is speaking against God. That God loves Netanyahu a little bit more than you and me is a fallacy that the church has kind of managed to dominantly preach. I mean, I grew up as a Christian, and I would go to church. I would go into the streets when I became an activist, and I would be singing PLO and ANC and Alliance, and I would go to church, and I'll be hearing this theology about the chosen people. I'm thinking, after Christ, you still are talking about the chosen people? I thought we're all chosen. I have no doubt that God does not love me less than Netanyahu. In fact, if Netanyahu is loved, I would be surprised. But that's joking. But that's for us. Yesterday I hear that there's 120 pastors that have gone to Israel and support. Thinking, God which God are you worshiping? A, a God who approves of 64,000 people killed and others buried under the rubble in his name? What kind of God is that? So there's a whole load of work to be done around people feeling guilty, telling Netanyahu that what he's doing is evil, because that's not God's work, and that's not. There's nothing evil about telling Netanyahu what Netanyahu is doing is evil. So you're absolutely right. The Christian Zionism is so prevalent in our churches that the number of people that turned out on Sunday is a reflection of that. If South Africa is a Christian country and the majority Christian, that much didn't say that. We didn't expect anyway, because we know the amount of Christian Zionism in our churches.
Yeah, I think that's a challenge.
In that morning, I worshipped in the same church. There was about 6,000 people in there. There were less people in the march than the people who went to that church in the morning. There's a whole load of work, and that's the way the march for us was the beginning of an engagement from church to church, and we have done it before, of engaging churches around these issues, this discomfort that people think that Israel is a chosen nation, as if Israel is the biblical, as if Netanyahu is a David.
And we all know that's not the case. Msizi Khuhlane, thank you so much for joining us. Really, really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you for having us.
There you go. And that was Msizi Khuhlane, one of the organizers of the South African Churches for Palestine. And they had a really, really incredible march just outside Soweto, where they walked to Regina Mundi Church. And yeah, I think it's very, very important, especially for South African Christians, because when you engage a lot, there seems to be a bit of confusion around Israel and biblical Israel and this pariah state of Israel, which is only in existence for a couple of years. And it just feels like the church is not driving that message as much as it should. Because I promise you, if majority of Christian South Africans understood that aspect, the streets would be way full when it's time to protest. There'll be way more pressure that is put onto our government to stop the trade against Israel, to close the Israeli embassy on our soil, and to stop all kinds of diplomatic ties that we still hold to this day with the state of Israel, that we've taken to the International Court of Justice for a genocide. So I think that message, especially by the church, needs to be driven a bit more. I have family, I have friends who, when you tell them about Israel, automatically they think about biblical Israel. And, when it comes to beliefs, when it comes to religious sentiment, it's really, really hard to change a person's mind. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues.